Akin with the Fiddle Leaf Fig Plant Resource Center, and today I want to tell you how to use a soil meter for your fiddle leaf fig. Now, this is one of the most important things that you can do to really address the growing conditions of your plant and troubleshoot any problems that you're having with your fiddle leaf fig. And so we have these soil meters that are designed specifically for fiddle leaf fig plants. You can click below to buy them. They're just under $20 on Amazon, and we stand by every single one of these. So if you have a problem, if it doesn't work, if you're not satisfied, let us know. We will refund your order or replace your soil meter. And so let's start by talking about why you would use a soil meter. So the first and the most important reason is to decide when to water your fiddle leaf fig. So we know that the number one cause of death of fiddle leaf fig plants is overwatering, which contributes to root rot. So you always want to use one of these if you're a novice before you water to make sure that your plant isn't already too wet when you're watering it, and to make sure that the roots are drying out in between waterings. The second is to test to make sure that your soil isn't too acidic. And so fiddle leaf figs that have too acidic of soil, either a number 6 or lower, that's too acidic, and they get yellow leaves, they look very unhappy, they won't be growing. Sometimes it's hard to tell what's going on with a fiddle leaf fig that is in too acidic soil because it can mimic some of the other issues like not enough light or not enough fertilizer. But if you're not sure what's going on with your plant, it's really important to test the acidity and make sure that it's a 6 or greater and that it's not too acidic. And then the third reason is to make sure your plant's getting enough light. And so with this soil meter, you can test the light exposure of your plant. You make sure that your fiddle leaf fig is getting plenty of light and that it's not suffering because of low light conditions, because we know that fiddle leaf figs love bright sunlight. And so you want to put it in the sunniest place possible in your home. And so these are actually pretty sophisticated pieces of equipment to manufacture and distribute for less than $20. And so take care, kind of treat this carefully, because it does include, 3 different functions, these probes that have to stay intact for it to work properly. You don't want to damage it, and you don't want to be too rough with it. And so they use 2 probes to test the moisture through conductivity. They also test the pH through that functionality, and there's a light diode here that tests the light exposure. And so you want to use all 3 functionalities to make sure that your fiddle leaf fig is getting proper care. And so we've done a lot of testing on these soil meters to make sure that they are very precise in their measurements. And the way I like to tell people to use them is use it like you would a thermometer in assessing the condition of health in your body. So, you wouldn't just use one temperature reading to say whether or not you're very sick or not, because, sometimes people run a little hot, a little cold. You would use it in an overall decision-making process with your intuition about what's going wrong with your body, and the same thing for your plant. So you want to use your readings and your intuition and what's going on with your plant to properly diagnose what's wrong with your plant and if you need to make any adjustments. And so just use it to support your overall plant care decisions. And as you use your soil meter more and more, you will get more used to the readings, and you'll know if your plant is relatively dry or relatively moist to when you often water it, and you'll get better and better at gauging the readings and your plant and your overall plant care plan. And so some of the most common mistakes with these soil meters is, first of all, you never want to leave it in the soil between uses. That will ruin the diodes. It will corrode them. Your meter will be ruined if you leave it in the soil between waterings. So you always want to remove it from the soil, clean it off with, just a damp cloth or a cloth. Make sure it's clean and dry, and store it in a clean and dry place just to make sure that you're going to get it to last as long as possible. You want to use it before you water your plant. And so I see a lot of people using it after they water, but then it's too late. You don't know how wet your plant was before you watered it. So use it before you water, and use it to help gauge your decision about whether or not you need to water your fiddle leaf fig at this time. You want to make sure that you do remove any dirt or debris before you store it, because if you have wet soil on the probes, they can ruin your soil meter when it's stored in a cabinet or wherever you store it. And so one of the most important mistakes that people make is they put it way too far down. So you don't want to put it all the way as far as down as it'll go. The proper way to use this is to insert it 2 to 3 inches into the soil and no more. Otherwise, you're not going to get a proper reading. And then you also want to avoid inserting it into the root ball itself. You want to insert it into the soil. So the roots, if you actually gouge the roots, they're always going to be wet. You want to put it into the soil to judge how wet the soil is, and that's really what we want to be reading. And once you put it in, you want to wait 10 seconds so that you can get a proper reading. It's not instantaneous, just let it sit for 10 seconds and then take your reading. One of the common mistakes I see is people thinking that the light meter doesn't work because our houses are actually a lot darker than we think they are. And so if your light meter, if you think that it's not working, take it outside in direct sunlight and you'll see that it probably is working. It's just your light in your home is probably a little bit darker than you think. And so general rules for use. You want to clean between uses. You want to use a clean, dry probe every single time. You want to store it in a clean and dry place like we discussed. You want to be gentle with the probes. This is a sophisticated piece of equipment. You don't want to, use the probes to manipulate your plant. You want to be careful with it. You want to insert it into loose soil, not the root ball itself. So when you put it into your fiddly fig soil, go about halfway between the trunk of the plant and the exterior of the container into the soil itself. They do not work in pure water, so if you try to insert it into pure water, you'll get a funky reading. They're designed for use in soil, and so you want to use it in the soil. And don't leave it in the soil between waterings. That is the most important thing. Anytime people email us and they're having problems, it's because they're leaving it in the soil and then watering the plant directly, and this is just corroding in this wet soil, and so you really want to store it correctly. So let's talk about how to use it for moisture. So before you decide whether or not you're going to water your fiddly fig, you want to take a reading and decide if it's time to water. So first thing you do is insert the probes 2 to 3 inches into the soil. And what I mean by that is halfway between the trunk of your plant and the exterior of your container. Halfway in, 2 to 3 inches deep. And that's where you want to measure the same time every time so that you get a consistent reading and you can compare how it was versus maybe last week or last time you measured. Let it dwell for 10 seconds and then assess your reading and consider your reading in the context of your plant. So if you know that you have a plant that doesn't drain well or is in, very moist soil, you want to wait for maybe a lower reading before you water. And so generally a reading of 4 or less is a good time to water your fiddly fig. 5 or greater, you want to wait and you want the soil to dry out a little bit more. Refer to our website for more information on when to water different plants. You can obviously use these meters with different plants, and so we have a whole chart on when to water based on the species of your plant. So to use your soil meter for the pH function, what you do is you switch this all the way over to the side to pH, and then what you're going to want to do is actually use the pH reading when your soil is moist, so it can't be completely dry. So do this after you water. So you insert it into the soil, the same thing, halfway in between and about 2 to 3 inches of depth. Your soil shouldn't be soaking wet, it should just be moist for a proper reading. Let it dwell for 10 seconds, and then you can test different areas to be sure, but what you're looking for is the pH number. And so the pH number is going to be between 1 and 10, and so you just want to basically make sure that your plant isn't too acidic. And so anything lower than a number 6 on the pH scale is going to be too acidic. I often see people with fiddly figs in the 5.5 or a 5 soil reading of pH, and their plants are very unhappy. And so you want a 6 or greater on the pH scale for your fiddly fig. And if you want to learn more about fiddly figs and acidity and how to adjust the acidity of your plant if it is too acid, we have a whole video on that that I'll link below. Finally, how to use the light meter. So the light meter is the one in the middle, so you're going to want to switch your little function to the middle, to the light, and the diode is on the front of the meter, so you want to point your diode at the brightest area. So put it where your plant is and point it towards the brightest sunlight, and get the reading. It's a reading between 0 and 2000, and so you're going to see a dark and a light area there, and so you want very bright light for your fiddly fig. And so here in this area, it's actually reading about a 200 or 300 because this is a pretty dark office, but you do want as bright as possible for your fiddly fig. So that can be a helpful way to go around your home and think about different areas where you might put your plant and test out the light reading and see if you can find a brighter area, because the more sunlight, the better for these plants, at least indoors. You don't want to not give them enough light because they will really suffer as a result. And so If you are getting a really low light reading, take your meter outside on the light function and see how it changes. Like I talked about before, a lot of times our homes are darker than we realize. And so if you take it outside, you put it in sunlight, it goes right to 2000, you know that it's working and you know that your house is just maybe a little bit darker than you thought. Fiddly figs can acclimate to darker homes. You just want to do it gradually. So you want to put it in the sunniest place first and then wait about a month and then move it to a less sunny place, and eventually they can acclimate to less bright conditions. You just want to do it over a gradual period of time. So to troubleshoot any problems, if you're having any problems with your soil meter, make sure that you're not leaving it in the soil between uses. Make sure you are reviewing the instructions on the package and using them exactly according to the instructions on the package. Test 3 different areas of the soil to make sure that you're getting an accurate reading. And then, like I said, make sure that your soil is not bone dry when you're using the acidity or the pH function. Make sure that it's moist but not soaking wet. And take it outside to test the light functionality if you think that it's not working. If you're still having problems with your soil meter, don't worry. We fully stand behind all of our products. So just shoot us an email or ask for a refund. We will refund it or we'll send you a replacement, whichever you prefer. So get in touch with us. I hope that this was a helpful video. Let me know if you have any questions. I will link our soil meter below for Fiddly Figs, and you can also check out some related videos below. Thanks for watching. Bye.